Greetings. This is Management 570, the seminar in human resource management, and we are going to be talking about diversity and diversity management in this particular lecture series. And we know, right, there's a lot of pushback these days on diversity management and DEI as a particular issue. And this is something that I am quite passionate about, so I want to share with you why it matters, to be able to hopefully answer some of the questions as to why people are pushing back against this. One of the biggest concerns people have is about this notion of what is equitable or fair. And the problem is you can't really legislate fairness because what is fair to one person is not fair to another. So our goal is to understand really what the fundamental issue is around diversity and diversity management. Yes, it's about fairness. Yes, it's about doing what we think is right. But really, at the end of the day, it's making sure that people feel included and they feel like they belong. And so we'll focus on that, and particularly at the end. But in the meantime, what I want to do is talk about the pros and cons of diversity management, why it matters, why people are against it, and really hone in on things like unconscious bias and elements like that that impact the way that we perceive others and the way that we perceive things in terms of fairness and equity. So broadly speaking, diversity is what encompasses the infinite range of ways that people are unique, that they are different, and what their experiences and characteristics are. So if you go from the center of this graph or this diagram to the outside of it, you at the beginning and at the middle, right, you're talking about personality and how my personality differs from you. These are basic individual differences. I'm more risk averse than you are. You are more external locus of control. I have a higher level of desire for achievement than you do. And honestly, most of the debates we have about differences and differences of opinions is around personality characteristics. We are all so different in terms of our personalities that it's often very difficult to come to a consensus on things when we know we've got people, with different values and different personality traits attached to some of those values. So obviously, there's very little we can do to change personalities. We can do personality tests for people coming in, but really, personality is about things that are a part of who we are inherently, genetically speaking. And it's also about it's also about nurture. So it's about nature and nurture. Most personality is nature, but there are some elements that are nurture. And specifically, we can make subtle changes to personality characteristics, et cetera, et cetera. For example, for years, I was very shy, and I really didn't like talking with other people. And I have learned over time, right, how to do that. Does that change my personality? I don't know if it changes my personality fundamentally, but I will admit that I'm much more comfortable speaking in a crowd. I'm much more comfortable speaking to an audience. And while I do need to regenerate my energy after I speak with a group of people, as any introvert would, I am a very outgoing introvert, in which case I am what we call an extroverted introvert, because I have learned how to put myself out there and how to, maybe fake it till you make it. I don't know. But I'm comfortable being able to do that. So these are all things that kind of impact the way we think about personality. I'm not getting into personality for those of you that are IO psychologists in the group. I'm not really getting at personality in the truest sense of the way psychology would define it. But I'm trying to get at the way individuals differ in terms of their points of view, in terms of their some basic constructs like extroversion and introversion and conscientiousness and the big five personality traits, and as well as getting at locus of control and need for achievement and those sorts of things. So So the next element is internal dimensions. Internal dimensions are those things that are really things we can't change, right? I can't change my age. I will grow older over time, but in this moment, I can't decide, well, in this moment, I want to be 55, or in this moment, I want to be 80. My age is what my age is. It is constrained by the day I was born, the year I was born, and I cannot change age and time in that manner. Other things, race. Race is not changeable. And in fact, as many would argue, right, race is really a social construction. Race doesn't have any genetic basis to anything. If you're talking about, well, someone's skin color is different than mine, well, that's skin color. That's not race. So, understanding that race is kind of a human construction of how people differ, I think is a really important factor. And then we have things like ethnicity, where I was born, what my heritage is genetically. Even though I'm white, I present in a certain way. I'm from Poland. My grandfather was from Poland. My grandmother also was probably a few generations removed from Poland. My children, however, present as white, but they're also part black. They're mixed race. And so they present themselves sometimes as passing, and it's hard to differentiate sort of how skin color might influence that. But ethnicity is about where you're born. It's about where your heritage is. It's about the languages that you speak. And when we think about employment laws, right, when we talk about national origin, that's connected to ethnicity. And national origin is not something that we can discriminate against. So we should be aware of that. Physical abilities, obviously, there are some fundamental physical abilities that people have. We're not taking into account someone who maybe had an accident and can no longer walk, or someone who's lost their eyesight, or something along that line. But my basic ability to do certain tasks are not really changeable. I have a skill level within a certain range of abilities, and that's about it. And the only time that changes really fundamentally is when there's external forces working on it. For example, an accident or an illness or something along that line that has an impact on my physical ability. But I can't change what I can and can't do. I am who I am. And sometimes, no matter how much you practice something, you're still not able to do it. And that's what we're trying to get at here is physical ability is pretty immutable. It's who we are. And the only time that changes is when there are, as I said, external forces having an influence on us. Sexual orientation also is considered an immutable characteristic. People have an attraction one way or the other to same sex or opposite sex, and so our sexual orientation is connected to like-handedness. We don't understand why people are attracted to one sex or another, just like we don't know why someone is left-handed versus right-handed. It is fundamentally, we believe, at the epigenetic level, which is, the markers within the genes that have an impact that can be turned on and turned off. And there's a whole host of science behind how people are have attractions to same-sex in same-sex relationships, and some of it has to do with feminization or the impact in the womb, depending on the parent carrying the child. And so there's a whole sorts of things that can go into orientation. And again, you can't pray being gay away. You can't go to therapies that make you change being gay. It doesn't work that way. You either are attracted or you're not. If young kids can know almost right away when they're young that they're attracted to girls or boys, and we see this with young kids. They don't even think about it. They automatically know when I like girls and I like boys. If they're heterosexual, and it's the same thing for people who are gay. You don't have to have a sexual experience to know what you're attracted to, although there's always debates on that amongst people. But being gay is not a choice. It is It is what people are, and that's about it. And we'll get into that in a little bit as we talk about some of the major topics in the areas of diversity. And then gender. Now, what we're talking about here is the sex to which we are born. XX, XY, XXY, XYY. There's a whole variation of genetic makeups. And those are things we cannot physically change. But when we talk about gender identity, that's a separate issue entirely. My sex is what it is the day I was born. XX or XY or any range of variations in genetic sexual sex traits, right? Gender identity is about a mismatch between the brain that says one thing and the body that says something else. And we'll get into that in more detail in the section on gender identity and sexual orientation and stuff to try to help explain that a little bit more for those that may not be aware of what those things mean. We all hear about it in the news, but we don't always know the deeper details about what it means to be transgender. So we'll talk about that in more detail. And at the end of the day, as I said, internal dimensions are really immutable. They don't really change. Personality really doesn't change. We could pretend. There may be some subtle variations over time, but generally speaking, our personality traits, our individual differences stay fairly predictable. The next thing is what we call those external dimensions out there. And those external dimensions are things like our family structure, our marital status, how many children we have, what kind of job do I do, or maybe that's more of an organizational dimension. But, what is my educational level, those sorts of things. And those external, and my experiences, right? Did I serve in the military, or what religion am I a part of? Religion is not an immutable characteristic. Religion is something that people may be born into a faith tradition that their parents have shared with them, but people can leave a religion at any time. People reflect on their spiritual and religious beliefs, and then they make a choice whether or not they're going to stay in the faith they were brought up in, or they're going to change and to go to another one, or remove it entirely. I was brought up as a Catholic, and I consider myself now Unitarian Universalist. I like the idea that there are multiple paths to connecting with God, and our job is to learn what those are. And so a UU faith tradition is about directing people to help them explore their spirituality and what matters to them. So again, religion is very different from that. So there are tons of different types of external dimensions out there, and they really just reflect different experiences that people have. Lastly is organizational dimensions. And as I said, the kind of job that I do, right? I have individual differences from my friends because I work in higher ed. I do different things than they do. And even within higher ed, I focus on management. A friend of mine is in OB. Another friend of mine does instructional design. Another friend of mine is in psychology. Friends of mine in engineering and social sciences and, you name it, right? So even though we're all in higher ed, we are very different in the discipline expectations and the way that we might view the world. For example, I'm in the business school, and I know without a doubt I'm among the highest paid faculty on campus after the dental school and probably even pharmacy. But, I look at my colleagues who are in philosophy, they do not make even close to what I make. And it's a discipline difference, so their pay is different, their perspectives are different. They are more inclined to unionize, and in fact, it was arts and sciences that really drove the unionization process here on campus. Not a judgment, it's just the truth, it's a fact. And so when we see, right, where people are in the organization and what their point of view comes from, where they are, how they interact with others, what their discipline is, what their the difficulties of their job, how senior they are in their job, all these things influence the way they see things. So at the end of the day, the things that we pay attention to in terms of employment law are the things that we really can't change. I can't change my personality. I can't change my physical abilities. I can't change my ethnicity or my age or my sex or my race. I can't change those things. So when we talk about employment law is to protect people from being treated differentially because of things they cannot change that have absolutely no impact on their ability to do their job. Now, when we talk about diversity management, it goes way beyond that. Diversity management is so much more than simply I'm gay, you're straight, I'm black, you're white, I'm Latino, you're Native American, my skin color is black and brown, and your skin color is tan, right? All of those things are things that are not changeable. But really what we're getting at with diversity management is how people interact with others, how people interact with me because I'm a woman. And so my difference of experiences is going to tell you that as a woman, I experience the world differently than you as a man. As a lesbian, I would experience the world differently than somebody who is straight. As a tall woman, I would experience the world differently than someone who is a short woman. So all of these things, diversity management is about recognizing the differences of experiences and exposures that we've had, the way people see us and the way we see the world because of who we are fundamentally. That's what diversity management is getting at, is recognizing that there's not one right way to see the world. I see it in a way from the lens that I use from my experiences, which is going to be different than yours. Now you might argue, oh, well, so then what's the difference? Why does it matter? Well, it matters because if I'm in a room and I'm telling you that I'm having an experience, you, you shouldn't be dismissed, right? You shouldn't dismiss me. And the same thing, if you're telling me you have an experience and I look at that like, well, I've never experienced that, that doesn't mean it's real. It's absolutely real. That experience is real for you. And I need to understand why you experienced that and figure out how we can make sure that that doesn't happen again, right? If it's a negative experience. Obviously, if it's a positive experience, it's something we want to cultivate. But diversity management is different than the law because the law is about protecting people from being fired for things they can't control versus diversity management is about how do we get along with everybody? How do we learn how to interact and talk with each other? And we'll talk about some of those things that we can do. But obviously, conflict resolution is a big part of that. Learning how to have difficult conversations, learning how to do conflict resolutions. These are the most important things.